stranger banging on my neighbor's door at 3 a.m. Terrifying. I had arrived to our family beach condo the night before everyone else was supposed to show up. I was a bit concerned because the balcony door on the patio didn't lock. The only thing holding it back was a small metal hook in a ring in the doorframe. This did not concern me at the time because our condo was located on the second floor, sandwiched in the middle of the condominium. It was highly unlikely a criminal would Spider-Man his way up into my specific patio. I went to bed and was awoken around 3 a.m. At first I thought there was an emergency because I heard alarms, but they quickly faded. This later turned out to be a part of my dream. There was someone banging on the door next to the condo I was staying in. When I wake up I'm usually a zombie, and can't think, and I slowly start to drag myself out of bed and walk to the door. I guess in my zombie mode I thought that the person banging at the door was my family members who were supposed to arrive the next day. But then I noticed that the deadbolt hadn't been locked, and that my family knew the combination to the door and wouldn't need me to open it. I began to panic. I quickly secured the deadbolt and secured 2 chairs near the patio door in case anyone tried to kick down the door. The person banging on my neighbor's door was there for 7 minutes. Not wanting to get a stern talking to from my family, it's a long story involving trust dynamics and how my family operates, and seeing as I hadn't heard any threats or attempt to kick down the door or any attempt to unlock it using lockpicking, I called the non-emergency number. Apparently, I had called the wrong county of the state I was in. I blamed this on the fact that I was still groggy and in zombie mode from recently waking up. The police transferred me to 3 other police lines and then eventually hung up on me. I called the non-emergency number again, the correct county this time, and they dispatched a police officer to come and investigate. By the time I had made the second call, the person had stopped banging on the door. The officer shows up 30 minutes later, and I explain the situation to him. The perpetrator is long gone and the officer says he will survey the scene and then leave. I also explained that I had called and been transferred 3 times and then hung up on. He explained that that was very nice of them, sarcastic, and to be expected from the operators around here. My family shows up the next day, at a reasonable time of day, and I explain the situation to them. They do not believe me. I eventually ran into the guy whose door was being banged on, the door the criminal was banging on, our condo neighbor at the time, and he confirmed to my doubtful family about the situation. He explains that he was awoken in the middle of the night by the banging on his door, and went to investigate who it was. However, he couldn't see through the peephole as the second unlocked wooden screen door was still closed and it was so dark out and hard to see. He grabbed a knife and asked several times, "Who's there?" with no response, and just continued banging at the door. Eventually the guy disappeared after 7 or so minutes of this. We never figured out who it was or why they did it. It might be as boring as some drunk going to the wrong room number and getting confused and leaving after 7 minutes, but the fact they didn't respond when asked who they were and then proceeded to leave without saying anything concerned me. There were no more incidents after that. He watched it burn. Terrifying. I wrote about my disturbed cousin before, but I'll write about him again with a bit more detail. For the sake of anonymity, I'll refer to my cousin as Jay. Jay and I are the same age, and when I was little he lived in the same apartment complex as me and my parents with his mom, older sister, and younger sister. His mother never fully disclosed who Jay's father was, but whomever he wasn't ever around. From an early age, Jay displayed disturbing and violent behaviors. They had to get rid of their pets because Jay would harm them. He was destructive with his toys and didn't enjoy playing normally with other children. He hated me greatly and would sometimes try and get physical, but I returned the same energy. He soon realized I wasn't the one and his assaults towards me became more verbal. Once, while riding in the back of his mom's station wagon together, he threatened to open the door and kick me out while the car was moving. I told him I could do the same to him. He said he hated me and I told him that he was just angry he couldn't hurt me. We were 6. One day his mom called my mom from the children's hospital. Jay had pushed his little sister down the stairs. He thought it was funny that she was injured and said he was disappointed she didn't die. His mom spanked him. He didn't cry. She then took him to church for prayer. His behavior didn't change. On one weekend, Jay's older, teen sister Dee came to visit us. She looked stressed and her toe was bandaged. My mom asked her what was wrong and she confided in us that Jay had become more violent. He was attacking them regularly, sometimes with sharp objects. It was so bad that they had to lock their doors at night to feel safe sleeping. My mom asked her what had happened to her toe. She told us that Jay had hit her foot with a clothing iron and knocked her toenail completely off. She showed us the horrific wound. My mom talked to Jay's mom about it and she said that nothing she did discipline-wise seemed to work. She confessed to being afraid of her own son. Jay's behavior continued to be violent and erratic. My mom and my visits became less and less, though they were literally in the same apartment complex. Dee would visit frequently for a mental break though. On one weekend, late at night, we were woken up by the sound of sirens and the smell of smoke. Of course everyone was on alert and we all headed outside. To our horror, it was our cousin's apartment ablaze. By God's grace, they all made it out safely. We later found out that the fire was set by Jay on purpose. He did it with one of his mom's lighters. After setting the fire, he stood outside eating a bag of chips, watching it burn with his family inside. The apartment complex kicked them out and they had to move back in with her mom. To our knowledge, Jay's mom tried to get him some form of counseling, but she wasn't consistent. She was a single mom and worked a lot, leaving Jay and his little sister in the care of Dee. She didn't really keep in contact with us or other extended family that much. Many years later we found out that Jay had murdered someone and landed in prison. I wasn't surprised. As a child he displayed clear psychopathic tendencies. I've always felt that he should have been committed to a facility early on when the first signs of his disturbed behavior surfaced. At this point none of Jay's immediate family speak to him. They treat him as if he never existed. Screaming across the road. Strange. I was playing on the PS5 and my buddy was in a party with me. We both heard this screaming, which coming from my side wasn't unusual cause I'm loud and annoying. But I was home alone and it was coming from outside my house. I got an A20 headset, so I walked out with the headset on, good Bluetooth connection, and the screaming was horrific. Literally sounded like someone was being murdered, but over and over again. I had a replica of Stormbreaker, Thor's axe, so I took that and went over to the house LOL. I got there but my headset lost connection, so my buddy couldn't hear me. I knocked on the door and the screaming immediately stopped. I heard footsteps coming pretty quickly from inside the house to the door, so I got ready to witness or create a scene. This lady, probably about late 20s early 30s, opened the door. I said, "G'day miss, you alright?" Me and my mate could hear screaming even with my headset on. She for some reason grinned and went, "Oh yeah, I'm so sorry, that was me." I said, "Oh, well are you okay?" And she goes, "Yeah, I walked in on my mum's dead body." Now at the time I was like, oh damn, that's pretty fucked, and yeah, I'd be upset if I walked in on that too, but I wouldn't be screaming like that. I so wish I recorded it, cause it was blood-curdling screaming. As I said, it sounded like someone was being murdered over and over again. I just said, "Oh, I'm really sorry miss," and kinda looked at her funny. I explained if she needed anything I'm up the road and I wished her the best, then she just walked away into the house without even closing the door. I closed it for her and walked back up the hill towards my house and my headset connected back to my mate. I explained to him what happened and he said, "You don't scream like that and for that long when walking in on that." Keep in mind the screaming was going on for about 20 minutes before I worked the courage up to go down and investigate. What sold the deal though was I got home, the screaming started back up again. How did they go from screaming, to smiling and no tears or anything on their face, to going back in and screaming again? Curiosity killed the cat and I called the police for a welfare check. Couple hours later they went over, but not from my phone call, just because there was a death and police had to investigate. They never got back to me about what happened, but now no one lives in that house. I think often about whether I looked a murderer in the eyes or if it was just some prank, I don't know. I think about it often. I'm masked from a different time zone? Strange. And I'm masked from a different timeline? My husband and I just experienced the most eerie thing that has ever happened to us before, and I'm convinced it was a glitch in the Matrix. Can someone help me make sense of this phenomenon? Okay, to keep a long story short, My husband and I sold our home in a different state about a month and a half ago, and now we live in his home state and we are temporarily staying with my wonderful in-laws, but really it's just the two of us and my mother-in-law because my father-in-law works in a different state until he retires in the near future. Anyway, my husband and I both sleep with a very specific brand of eye masks because we're both light sleepers and are sensitive to light. These eye masks are from Amazon and I've gone through several of them because they rip apart after a few months, but they are super comfortable and cheap, so I don't mind. My husband decided he wanted the same mask, so I gave him my old one a few months ago and ordered myself a new one. They are the exact same mask, all black with the company's logo on the left. Okay, so while we're staying with my in-laws, we're staying in their basement. They have a nice basement with 2 rooms. My husband and I sometimes sleep apart because he has to wake up hours before I do, but because of Hurricane Helen, we decided to sleep in the same room so his mom can sleep in the basement in the room I normally sleep in. I was in the room making the bed and picking up a little so she can be comfortable, and I cleaned out my white nightstand that I put my book, Kindle, glasses, phone and red light therapy machine on every single night. I use that nightstand every day. I open the drawer every day, I make the bed every time I sleep in it. The room is completely and utterly spotless. I'm getting off track here, but when I made the bed I noticed I left one of my water bottles on the bottom shelf the night before and I wanted to fill it up so I can have an extra 1 BC of the storm. I picked up in the room, dusted the nightstand and went upstairs to get water. When I came down I saw an eye mask that is the exact same brand and style as the eye mask both my husband and I use, but this one is blue. We have never owned a blue eye mask, and my husband and I were just down there prepping the room for his mom, and we came back down and the mask was there. In the place I usually put my old black eye mask and water bottle and whatnot. We have never owned this eye mask. In fact, my husband would have no idea where to buy it from, but it's the same eye mask I gave him and the brand I use, just a completely different color, and there's no logo. When I showed my husband we were complete and utterly spooked as we both looked at and dusted the side table these were on about 5 minutes prior. This is the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. It's the same eye mask without a logo and a different color that randomly showed up within a few minutes on our end table. We are completely spooked. This feels like it's my eye mask, but from a different timeline that we just jumped. And no, we're not on drugs. We are both completely sober and do not drink or smoke or anything, so I don't know what to attribute this to. She pleaded for help. Terrifying. When I was around 9 I lived in a strange house with my mom, grandma, and small dog. My family and I were night owls and often stayed up until early morning hours. On this particular weekend it was around 2 in the morning when we heard a loud pounding at the living room door. We were taken aback because of the time, but cautiously opened the wooden door, but not the iron door, to peek out. There on the porch stood a disheveled, pretty young woman wearing a white jacket. She was looking around fearfully and was out of breath. Once she saw we had opened the first door, she pleaded for us to let her in so she could use our phone. She explained she had jumped from her abusive boyfriend's car and had ran to our house. Now during this time quite a few bank robberies and assaults had taken place, so we weren't about to let anyone we didn't know in, but told her to wait there and we would call the police for her. She agreed and sat on the steps. We opened the door wider to watch over her as my mom called the police. The operator stayed on the phone with my mom and agreed with our decision to not let her in, but ask her to remain on the porch until help arrived. Suddenly we heard her scream as she jumped up from the porch steps and headed to our door. We heard the sound of an engine. A red car drove by slowly watching her, my mom and I, and drove off. She said it was her boyfriend. The car turned around and came back the opposite way and drove by slowly again. The young woman was shivering, but we told her the cops were already on the way and the operator was still on the phone. The car came a third time and parked across the street. Her boyfriend rolled the window down and yelled, "Get your ass back in the car." The young woman screamed back, "No." At this point we were resolved to let her in and opened the iron door. Just before she could enter we heard the comforting sound of police sirens approaching. Her boyfriend sped off and turned the corner quickly. The police pulled up and we all felt relieved. They came up and took her statement. It took about 20 minutes and then they took her away in a police car. We don't know what happened to her after that. We never even learned her name as she didn't offer it and we didn't ask as we all were nervous and scared. I think about her from time to time and hope they arrested her boyfriend and that she stayed far away from him as he was trash.